What do we actually know about the hostage negotiations and what is on the table, what isn't? There's so much speculation, so much assumption that Israel could somehow they could have magicked up a deal, but it's all their fault because they didn't want to or they wanted to continue the war. There's so many reasons why this is blatantly false. And I don't want to just show you speculation. I want to give you some actual concrete evidence and information. Over here is a picture of Brigadier General Gal Hirsch, the Israeli coordinator for hostages and missing persons, who gave a rare interview on Nadav Perry's podcast recently. And there are some really important points from his conversation which I want to share with you. So this was reported by Uriel Schachter on Twitter. Here's what some of the key points were. Number one, regarding the current negotiations, I'm aware of the feeling created by the summit in Doha last week. The build-up leading to it created very high expectations, still hoping that we can bring about a breakthrough, but we're facing very big difficulties. 2, contrary to what we usually hear, the deal is not being sabotaged by Netanyahu or anyone on the Israeli team. Things do not depend on our will alone. On the other side, Hamas simply does not come to the negotiating table. In fact, they've almost never engaged. 3, not everything depends on us, but we're working 24/7 to bring everyone home, both the living and those who have died. We do this through various operations and try to find cracks through which we can be creative. We work on it all the time and encounter many difficulties. 4, regarding decision-making on the other side and the mediators, there is no doubt that the decision-maker on Hamas's side is Sinwar. His influence is absolute. Until Def was targeted, Mohammed Def, the decision-makers were Def and Sinwar, but now it's only Sinwar. The people in Israel and around the world hear all kinds of Hamas spokesmen. There are many speakers. They very often BS everyone. They don't have any relevant updated knowledge. They speak a lot, but often there is nothing behind it. 6, all of these speakers are successful in targeting ordinary people with their propaganda. Then the international media publishes it as fact or as an official Hamas agenda. But these spokesmen are not really updated by Sinwar and they just sow chaos. 7, we're in a reality where there are intermediaries. We're very appreciative of the United States and the administration's efforts. The White House, the State Department, and intelligence agencies, they all put in a lot of effort. There is intense work together. 8, in addition, there are the Egyptians and there are the Qataris. These are not brokers in the classic sense of brokers. These are mediators who have their own interests. We have to navigate within this very special composition of the US, Qatar, and Egypt as mediators. 9, regarding Hamas, when you describe them as savages, it may seem as if there is no rationality on their side, but there is rationale. Their rationale is that there will be no state of Israel. God forbid. At best, Jews can pay skull tax and live under Islamic rule. 10, what Hamas tried to do on October 7th, it's trying to do now as well. Bring the region into a multi-arena war. Around Ramadan, we tried to bring a deal. We wanted with all our hearts to believe that this might be possible, but Sinwar tried to use Ramadan to extend the war. 11, Sinwar is constantly waiting for this full-scale multi-arena war, and now in August he still hopes, and now of course we're in September, but he was hoping that he'll be able to light a big fire and it will ignite and spread as he earlier hoped. 12, I want to be clear, whoever thinks the deal failure is only about the Philadelphia axis should know that Hamas's goal is to extend the war. This is the story. It uses the hostages only to split Israeli society. In fact, every time we compromised, Hamas asked for more. 13, what has happened until now is that, in the only time we stood firm, we advanced. Between June 11th, when Hamas gave us its rejecting answer, until July 27th, which is the Netanyahu-Biden outline, there was a very unique period in which we refused to compromise even a bit. 14, we did not agree to Hamas's request that the war stop before negotiations. And still, this was not the only demand of Hamas. There were 29 amendments they put on their own proposal that they themselves initiated on May the 6th. 15, what we can learn from this, they don't want a deal. They play games with us, but for the first time from June the 11th until July the 3rd, we stood firm, and everyone in the world was also busy with their own affairs. Then we got into Rafah and Hamas started compromising. 16, and then what happened? Hamas came back with a surrendering message saying, okay, we don't demand the end of the war as a condition for entering negotiations, but we demand. From that moment on, we knew we could try and move forward. That led to the Rome summit. 17, from the day I took office to this very day, some people say, if you just compromise here, then everything will work out. This is nonsense. On May 27th, we were not yet in Rafah. So naturally, we could not demand it in the negotiations, but all the principles remained. 18. Regarding the first deal, on October 26th, when Israel invaded Gaza, Hamas was amazed. They thought it would be like in early operations of the IDF, where Israel just attacks from the air and doesn't maneuver. But when 6 divisions of the IDF entered and went all the way, and Israeli society united around one message: we will hit you hard, we will return the hostages, and we will win the war, Hamas understood that it had made a mistake. So in November, after we started maneuvering in Gaza, Hamas had to stop our advancement. The only way they could do it was to release some hostages. After the first deal, some people said the children and women were a burden for Hamas, so they had to get rid of them. To anyone who tells me this, I say, wait, then why are they still detaining women? And why are they still detaining foreign citizens? For Hamas, everything is an asset. But then in November, they had to stop us from maneuvering inside Gaza. Why did they stop the deal after 8 days? My understanding is that they felt they had enough time to reorganize and they didn't want to give up more hostages. People have to understand, after the first deal, when Israel returned to fighting after 8 days, and now we're about 42 days, it had a terrible price in terms of the fighting and its effect on our losses. When your enemy is armed, organised, equipped, knows where you stand, etc., it has serious consequences. We paid the price because that's who we are and these are our values. We pay high prices that our children will come back home. I'm not a political person. I see things from the security perspective, and I want to tell you that without the Philadelphia corridor, a huge amount of weapons will enter the Gaza Strip, and the goals of the war as they are defined will not be achievable. We have 119 abductees in Gaza. This was said just before we found out that 6 had been murdered just a few days ago. And we know there are many dozens alive. For me, every person is the whole world. We will bring them home. So, a few takeaways. First key takeaway is that Hamas don't really want a deal. There's no deal that will lead to just this end to the fighting. They're a Nazi-esque organisation that wants to destroy the Jewish state and the Jews. That's point number 1. Point number 2, this idea that there's somehow this great deal on the table that Israel just isn't taking because they're warmongers, they want to continue the war, is nonsense. Number 3, when you're dealing with a people or an organisation that abducts your people, rapes, mutilates, abuses them, massacres them, any kind of hostage negotiation, where the negotiation means you release murderers on their side, where it means compromising your own security, where it means not dealing with their threat. Yes, you're trying to protect the hostages' lives and bring them home, but how many more lives, how much more blood are you spilling? How many more lives are you losing by doing these deals? Don't forget, Sinwar was released because there was so much pressure to get Gilad Shalit back 10 years ago. Shalit was returned, and I'm delighted for him and his family. But what was the cost? 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. One of them was Sinwar, who orchestrated October 7th. October 7th was the cost. It's so difficult and painful because these are such painful, horrendous, horrific, gut-wrenching choices to have to deal with. But Judaism teaches that when you have a very high price with hostages, you get them back through military might and force, if please God you're able to, but certainly when the price is releasing murderers, threatening your people further, how can you do that? You embolden your enemies. You tell them taking hostages pays. You tell them, if you take us hostage, we'll give you what you want. So you're incentivizing them. So you're creating a hostage industry. Far from protecting your people, you're holding your entire people hostage. And so as difficult as these conversations are, they need to be had. We have to understand what's actually happening in terms of the situation, but also the moral truth of how you deal with such situations. You get peace through strength, and you have that strength through understanding the truth. Hi, thank you so much for watching. To watch another one, click here. To stay up to date with all our content, click here to subscribe. And if you're able to, you can help support JTV to grow and grow by clicking join below this video, where you can become a member and get perks including early access to videos and private live discussions with me. But most of all, you'll be partnering with us on our mission to change the world.